Welcome back to Open Line. I'm Chris Davis. So glad that you're here with us. Lots to talk about with Beth Brown. She's the president of the Tennessee Education Association. Very busy time right now on Capitol Hill. Lots of education bills moving through. I want to get to George on the phone lines. George, go ahead with your question for Beth.
Yes, sir. My thing is, okay, now I'm seeing that, of course, the mask mandate thing that's going on, now they talk about something that's coming through or some kind of other virus thing coming. Is it really appropriate to do away with all the mask mandate through all the schools at this point, or should they continue with it?
George, thanks for your call, and I know this may be a little tricky to answer for you, Beth, because districts are doing various things, but curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so couple of things. There was a special session in the fall where the General Assembly essentially banned mask mandates in districts where there were not federal lawsuits pending. My understanding is that now the last of the school districts who still had mask mandates in place have lifted those mandates. And so I'm not even sure if another variant causes infection rates to spike in our state, if school districts would even have the ability to implement a mask mandate because it has been outlawed by the General Assembly.
And certainly an interesting situation, and some districts like Metro and Memphis have tried to continue on, but you're right, that bill certainly was passed to hinder districts and their ability to make a choice on that. Another topic I know, Beth, that you are wanting to talk about tonight, and I'm sure people that are highly invested in education in Tennessee are hearing a lot about, is changing how Tennessee funds public education. BEP is probably a term a lot of people have heard about. That is the existing model, and I think everybody would agree it's pretty complicated as it stands. Is that right, Beth?
Yeah, the BEP, or Basic Education Program, is a 30-year funding formula. It is very complex. It has 46 different components. The biggest problem with the BEP, however, is that it is chronically underfunded. Tennessee remains in the bottom 5 in the nation for school funding in our state. So that has been a conversation that's been happening alongside conversations about how to update the funding formula itself.
Absolutely. So it seems like, by talking to a lot of people, I did a story just yesterday about TISA, the new funding formula that's proposed. It seems like a lot of education advocates are in the spirit of the bill, but are the devil in the details there, Beth? The
TISA, or the Tennessee Investment in Student Achievement Act, is currently in front of members of the General Assembly. It is a substantive rewrite of our 30-year funding formula. It does present as a student-based funding formula. I think one of the exciting things for me as a 21-year educator is just the level of conversation that has happened over the last 6 months as the state has been discussing a rewrite of our funding formula. There has been recognition, one, that we need additional funding, and we saw even the governor acknowledge that with the increased investment of approximately $1 billion in recurring funds. So the acknowledgement that additional funding is needed and that it's available in our state without raising taxes, that in and of itself is extremely exciting. But I think, too, the conversation about that it takes a lot to educate our students, and that students have very different educational needs, and those needs cost differently. And so when we think about the funding formula itself, if you're not familiar, if you'll indulge me, Chris, I'll just do a little short lesson here. The funding formula as it's presented is kind of like a pyramid, and on the very bottom level you have your base funding, where every student is going to generate a base dollar amount at $6,860. And then as you move up the pyramid, you're going to see different weights applied. And so students can generate different amounts of funding. And there are certain pieces of that are great. Students who are economically disadvantaged are going to get extra funding because there are challenges that come with being economically disadvantaged. Students with different disabilities, there are 11 unique learning needs that generate different levels of funding, so they're weighted differently. Students who are in small districts or sparse districts have an additional weight to help with to generate funding for the district. So those are some really great conversations. There is a piece in the weighted formula that the Tennessee Education Association and others are concerned about, and that is the weight that is assigned for charter schools, because it's taking charter school funding out from outside of the formula and baking it in permanently to our funding formula and incentivizing charterization. So that's of concern to my organization and others as well. And then as you move up the pyramid, you've got direct funding. So the governor and the commissioner of education, the department, are proposing $500 for every K-3 student in direct funding. So they would generate $500 to help with literacy. Fourth grade students who are not on reading level would generate an additional amount. There's a very large funding amount ascribed to every student in a CTE or career and technical education program of $5,000. So we see a strong commitment from the governor and the Department of Education on career and technical education. And then there's direct funding for administering the ACT. I will tell you that TEA certainly supports a strong career and technical education program. Glad to see that investment. However, we are disappointed that we don't see the same level of investment for our youngest students who need early literacy supports. So we're hopeful that as the General Assembly is having conversation about this new funding formula, that they call for increased funding for K-3 literacy. And then the last part of the pyramid, the very top, is called outcomes, and that's where the governor and the commissioner are seeking to reward school districts for standardized test scores and CTE certifications.
I want to bring Robert into the conversation. Robert, what's on your mind? Welcome to OpenLine.
Thank you. I would just like to make a suggestion. With all the money spent on education, when I went to school a long time ago, we didn't have the learning problems we have now. And no matter how much money you spend, there'll be certain students that tend to get behind. And I think we should try something in this country like they do in Germany. Once a pupil reaches a certain age, if they tend to be slow at learning, they put them in trade schools where they learn a trade. And that would prevent students from getting behind and feeling that's a bad feeling when you're behind in a classroom. And no matter how much money you spend, you'll never compensate for that. And that's just my comment.
Thank you so much for the call, Robert. We appreciate it.
Yeah, so Robert raises some interesting points. First of all, there's the recognition that students learn at different rates. They have different ability levels, and what it's going to take to provide a high quality education is going to look different. It's going to cost different. So that's definitely part of the conversation with this new funding formula. The other point that he raises around, helping students find where they can be successful. I do think that the state and stakeholders across the state recognize that we need a strong career technical education program, just as we need a strong college preparatory program, because we do have students that are going to take very different paths. And so making sure that students are prepared for success post high school is absolutely critical. I do not disagree with that, Robert.
We have had some great calls like Robert's and others tonight. Keep them going. If you have questions for Beth, you see the number on your screen. We'll have more with her right after this break.